with the panel. So hello, everyone. We are so delighted to have you here for today's panel on cancer in the workplace. And I'm going to kick over to Anna to introduce herself, and then Joe, and then I'll introduce myself.
Hi, so my name's Anna Dunn. I'm head of coaching and director of services at Working with Cancer. I've worked with Working with Cancer for 3 years because I'm also a cancer coach, which is where I started. How did I get into cancer coaching? Well, there's the before and the after, isn't there? I think anyone who's had cancer has a before and an after. So before cancer, I worked in human resources for 16 years. And I did take a break to have children, and at that point was diagnosed with melanoma, which for me, I really struggled with the emotional impact of cancer and feeling like I got it all wrong, which now I know is quite normal. At the time, I found it quite isolating. I decided to retrain as a coach, and after I'd retrained and worked as an executive coach, I met Barbara. I was also volunteering with Cancer Support UK as a cancer coach. And then on meeting Barbara, the opportunity to integrate my coaching skills, my HR background, and my own personal experience with cancer, it just created the ideal scenario, the perfect scenario. And so 3 years later, absolutely love what I do. It's very fulfilling, and it's a great place to be.
Fantastic. Thanks, Anna. Joe, do you want to tell us a little bit about your background as a
Oh,
coach?
thanks, Caitlin. Hi, I'm Joe Larbie, and I've been an associate coach with Working with Cancer since 2024. And as Anna, to use Anna's term, pre-cancer, my background is I trained as a lawyer and did work as a corporate lawyer before I saw the light and moved to the people side of the business and sat on the board with responsibility for HR and organizational development. And for me, very much a key part of my role and responsibilities was around people and developing people. And that's really carried on into my work in terms of being an executive coach, leadership coach, and also then my work that I do with Working with Cancer. I had a number of years of cancer, different cancer diagnosis and treatment. And I was fortunate enough to hear Barbara speak at a workshop. And when I came to the end of my treatment and was feeling that I just really didn't know where to go, I managed to track down this person called Barbara Wilson and was very fortunate in being coached by Barbara. And that helped me to sort of get on the road to rebuilding. And I'd said to Barbara at the time, one day I'm going to come back and be, be a coach with Working with Cancer. And that one day came, and here I am.
Fantastic. Thanks, Joe. And much like Anna, I think there really is a kind of before and after of cancer. And so for me, I was living my best life. I was having a wonderful time working as an academic, and I'd previously had some roles in the technology industry as an analyst, and I had done coaching training previously. So I had done a fair amount of coaching for folks who were working in the tech industry and maybe wanted to level up their career or perhaps leave the tech industry and start their own business. And then I kind of decided that I was going to go off and become an expert, which is a very different role than being a coach, and was working as a strategist for many years, then went back into academia, and then had my cancer diagnosis shortly before my 39th birthday, which came as a shock for everyone, including the surgeon, everyone involved, and was lucky enough to be one of the very first people in my ward to receive immunotherapy for the type of cancer that I had, which was breast cancer, and it was one of the more difficult to treat kinds of breast cancer. And we're very lucky that as scientific research improves, there are new treatments available all the time. So I was really lucky in that my journey of treatment was very straightforward. But one of the things that it really called me to do was to rethink my relationship with work and life. And I was receiving some support from Breast Cancer Now, which is a cancer charity, and they had a wonderful webinar for women with younger women with cancer that was by Working with Cancer to talk about some of the specific issues that people who are of working age face, when they're diagnosed with cancer, because it is a topic that people often don't associate with younger folks. And so that was really wonderful. And I had some coaching from the coach that was leading that, and then was kind of thinking about what I wanted to do, really wanted to reconnect with my coaching work, and was lucky enough to have Working with Cancer say, hey, we might have a position available. Would you be interested in coming to work with us? And so here I am. And it's been, I think that sense of wanting to help people who have been in the same position as you, and to know that you're at a different point in your journey, and to be able to look back and see the challenges that they're facing, and to imbue them with confidence that where they are now isn't going to be where they are forever, is something that I really value about the work that we do. Right. So thank you. That was, I think, a beautiful introduction for all of the ways that we got involved in this. And I think we're going to kick off with Anna to tell us a little bit about the Working with Cancer philosophy, and what we're all about at Working with Cancer.
Yeah, so I think we're grounded in this simple notion that anyone who's been affected by cancer in the workplace, and that can be someone who's had a cancer diagnosis, someone who's a carer, or someone who's been bereaved to cancer, everyone deserves support at work, so that they can feel confident returning to work. And unfortunately, what we see is that's not always the case. And if you look at some of the statistics, I think it's that cancer diagnoses in under 50s has increased by nearly 80% in 30 years, which means that more and more people are living with, which is great, and also working with cancer. And what we know and have found out is that a lot of organizations aren't set up to support people, and that when a person's returning to work with cancer or caring for someone with cancer, it's really difficult for them to understand and ask for the adjustments that they might need. So I guess there's three things that really stand out to me in our coaching. The first one is that we help to normalize conversations about cancer. There's often still a stigma at work about cancer. People don't like to talk about it, which makes it feel like a kind of a taboo subject. And so we help people talk about their cancer diagnosis and their situation, but also help organizations to normalize those conversations, because so many people are afraid to tell their employer that they have cancer, which is a horrifying thought, but it's a reality. There's so much complexity to the emotion involved, the sense that you're not going to be good enough to do your job anymore, that you might lose your job, the guilt that a person's feeling. And so the first step to me is about normalizing conversations so someone can confidently tell their manager they've got a cancer diagnosis. Doesn't mean anything, they're not going to be able to do their job, but they feel safe saying that they have that. So that's the first part. We really help to normalize conversations about cancer at work. Second thing that really stands out is the sense that all of us at Working with Cancer have had a lived experience of cancer. So as we've explained, Caitlin, Joe and I have had a cancer diagnosis. Some people have been carers for someone with cancer or bereaved to someone with cancer. And I think that gives us that connection and that real sort of understanding of what a person's going through, which I think really helps build those relationships. And one of the many things I often hear at the end of a first session is repeatedly, this is the first time I felt heard and understood. Not to say that someone who hasn't had cancer can't give that support at all, but it's the sense that you can create that safety. And the third part that stands out is that within our coaching, we support individuals through one-to-one coaching, but when they're working in an organization, we also support their line manager. And the role of the line manager in someone returning to work or someone working with cancer is often hugely underestimated. We recognize that bringing them into the conversation helps to join up some of the issues that a person might be having, and helping in getting that person the support they want, but also giving the line manager support. It's a difficult job they have, and often with the best will in the world, they don't have the skills to support someone with cancer. So I think those are the three parts that really stand out to me. But the fundamental philosophy is that people need support when they're coming back to work. They can come back to work, they want to come back to work mostly, but they need support.
Yeah, hugely. Joe, is there anything you want to add there?
I think just elaborating on the point that Anna made about the coachees' responses in the first session. I think one of the things that I often hear is someone saying, well, actually, this is the first place where I felt I can say some of the things that have been really worrying me that I just didn't feel I could say to family or friends
Mm.
because there's an element of actually feeling that you have to protect them from some of the worst fears that you have.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, hugely so. That objectivity, but also that understanding, I think, is really key. And I think that's one thing, so as Anna pointed out, it's not that people who don't have this experience are not capable of coaching, but I think it really helps build the rapport with the coachee. It really helps build that trust. And since this is an ICF event, if we're talking about kind of core competencies, in terms of coaching presence and trust building and rapport, those are all things that I think come from that shared experience. And Joe, I think can we talk a little bit about how coaching for people with cancer in the workplace differs from coaching in other sectors and other settings? Like, are there specific techniques or approaches that you found particularly effective?
Thanks, Caitlin. I think the first really significant difference is that in coaching someone who's working with cancer, you're starting very much from the viewpoint of their experience. Each person who has a cancer diagnosis and treatment is unique. Yes, there are common elements about the nature of the treatment that you go through. But actually, each person is so different that I can't, I have a sense of how it's going to work as we coach, but equally, I have to constantly remind myself to start and go from where they are. And compared with executive coaching, it's a much more reflective process. It's helping someone to, I think the stages are, there's the recognition and the acknowledgement of loss and bereavement, that pre-cancer self that you had. There's that sense of I had a roadmap, but this diagnosis has completely thrown me off track. There is the second part, I guess, of what we do, which is again about helping the coachee to start to rebuild and recover. And for me, a really a strong motivation in being a working with cancer coach is that future focused uh, uh, motivation in terms of really encouraging people to not feel that their life has ended, but there is more to come. It's just that at the moment you don't have a sense of the route or the path that you're going to take. So all of that very much comes into the work. And I also think that the difference, if we're looking at other sectors and working with different groups, is that quite often much of the coaching is also involves supporting and helping the individual to regain their confidence, their trust in themselves, their trust in their body, and their self-belief and the sense of having to learn how to live with uncertainty. Because that sense of uncertainty, as we may discuss later, so for some people, it can come out of nowhere years down the road. Equally, it can be something that's very present, just close in time in terms of having completed your treatment. So, Caitlin, that's enough for me. Thanks.
Thanks, Joe. And I think one thing I would add is to build on that point about uncertainty. So, a lot of the people that we work with, they might still be in treatment or they might have kind of follow up treatment plans that require kind of ongoing support through their medical team that require them to really readjust their expectations about what work means to them. And often, when I'm working with other kinds of coachees, the the plans don't have to be so flexible. And when I'm working with cancer coachees, sometimes they're thrown for loops in ways that are really unexpected. So a lot of the work is around managing that uncertainty and feeling resilient to the buffers that are coming their way. Anna, how about you? Is there anything you want to add there?
Yeah, so I really agree with Joe about everyone's experience is completely unique, and you're very much tailoring the support to meet them where they are. There's definitely some themes though that do come up in, that I experience, and often we'll be working with someone. Most people, when they finish their treatment, we do support people during treatment, but often it's when the treatment is finished, because this often coincides with when a person's thinking about going back to work. And we help to normalize, I think, some of the unexpected emotional responses that people have. There's a horrible misconception out there that when your cancer treatment finishes, you're going to feel amazing and relieved and happy and ready to take on the world. And that puts a lot of pressure on people to expect that. And for myself and for many, many people I work with, that's not the case. A
And
lot of people
actually, Anna,
describe,
can I jump in? Not only
yeah.
that, but often the people around you who have been through the treatment journey with you, that is how they are feeling at that time. So when you're not feeling that way, there's a real mismatch, and that can be a real
Mm.
shock for everyone involved.
I mean, cancer, it's lonely anyway, but that puts you in another very lonely place where, why am I feeling like this, I got something wrong. And often people come to coaching with that, and I think it's so comforting for them when we say, no, that's normal, no, that's okay, that's normal, it won't last forever. This is, recovering from cancer is a process, returning to work is a process. And I often see the sort of palpable relief on someone's face to know that they're not alone. And I would say that a lot. You're not alone anymore. I'm here to support you. I'm on this journey with you. But yeah, that's a theme that comes up. But another difference is that I think cancer coaching is much more directive than you would be in say executive or leadership or life
Mm.
coaching, because these are people who are really vulnerable, probably, possibly struggling with side effects like fatigue, brain fog, some cognitive impairment. They've lost confidence. They're not necessarily in a position where you can really put all the onus on them to find the solutions. It's not like that. So I know, Caitlin, when you started, we had this conversation, didn't we, about how different it is. And you are giving more advice. You are, and you're being more directed because that's what the person needs. And that's about adapting your style to what that person needs in the moment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Can
there
I
is an,
just come in on
yes,
that,
please, Joe, go
Caitlin?
ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that is, again, that's quite a significant difference in that you, as a coach, you are much more directive. And what I remind myself is that A, in coaching and supporting someone to find their way through and to rediscover whatever route or path they're going towards, that we're offering that advice. We're not there, we're not counseling, we don't tell them what to do. Um, you know, people are quite capable eventually of getting to where they're going to get to. But at that particular point, you recognize that the difference between executive coaching and working with cancer coaching is that you need to actually guide them rather than thinking that they'll come to the answer themselves, or you can question and probe, and that will help them to get to that point. Because sometimes people, you sense that they're really just lost and struggling.
Yeah,
Thanks,
and
Caitlin.
I think I would add as well, there is an appropriateness within the ICF around the appropriate use of facts and models and frameworks within coaching, which I think is what we do. And in terms of the kinds of advice we might offer, so Amanda, maybe you could put some links to the best practice guides that we have, because I think a lot of it's really about signposting. So some of it is direct advice from experience that we have or things that we know. It's all research backed. And some of it is about helping people find other resources. So I often direct people when they're asking about things like, what kinds of reasonable adjustments can I have? Some unions have really good advice about this, actually, for example. So it might be about just helping people figure out where they need to go to get the knowledge that they need, which is a normal and natural part of any kind of coaching. But as you say, for us, it's a little bit more into directive, than it might be with other kinds of coachees, because they just need more resources because this is such a new experience for them. Yeah, thank you so much, Amanda, for sharing that. And then I think as well, one thing is that I'm curious about is what are some unexpected impacts that we typically see on coachees and also on organizations within the work that we do? And Anna, I think you've already brought up one, which is around that sense of feeling out of touch with the rest of the organization or with the rest of the people around you, and how to help people feel like that is a normal thing. Is there anything else you want to add?
Yeah, so I think often when people are returning to work, they feel guilty. And it's such a harsh one to think someone feels it, but they do feel guilty that they've been off, and people have been covering for them. There's a bit of shame sometimes that they feel weaker than they were. They talk about pre-cancer. I can't do what I used to be able to do before. And it's really upsetting, and it's difficult from a confidence perspective. And as an employer, they're looking to be guided by that person about what they can do, what they can't do. So the thought of having to, I often see this with particularly high achievers, having to say, I can't do this now is really, really quite difficult. And so it's helping people to kind of make peace with the sense that, no, you can't do that now. And that's right. That's okay. Put these boundaries in place. This is a process, and explaining that it's a process and it's unpredictable. You can make the phased return plan, but it might change along the way. So that often comes up a lot. And I think it's unexpected, and cancer recovery, return to work is full of the unexpected and the unpredictable. And I think that in itself, educating organizations and people, managing their expectations, it's not a nice linear recovery. It's very up and down and unpredictable, unexpected. Expect the unexpected, whereas that's often not what people expect, and what the employer expects. So there's some real sort of re-education around that.
Joe, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, thank you, Anna. I think also just thinking of an analogy between it, when someone breaks their leg and their leg's in plaster, and everyone in the at work can see that they've had an injury, and then the cast comes off and they're limping for some time. And people know how to respond to that. But when someone goes back to work having had cancer treatment, people assume that because you're back at work, then everything's all right. But actually, for the person who's returning to work, there is just so much, as Anna's said, to cope with. And I think that sense of I don't feel like I don't want to feel like I'm playing for sympathy. I don't want to keep talking about it because I'm back at work now, and all the signals are I've got to just get on with it, and I feel I've got to get on with it. I've got to prove myself, and that the whole performance anxiety in terms of the pre-cancer and the post-cancer, and at the beginning when Anna alluded to that sense of returning to work and feeling that you have to prove yourself, but also as part of the coaching, thinking really about what is the place of work in my life, and what does work mean to me. And one of the unique themes that comes up is coaching someone who says, well, my work used to be everything, and now it doesn't. I'm not sure that it is, or I want it to go back to the way it used to be, and helping and coaching and helping them to find their way through that.
Yeah. Just to add to that, Joe, because that's such a good point there, that inevitably people's perspective on life changes after cancer, and it can actually be changed for the better. It's often a healthier, more balanced perspective, but it's usually very different. And we sort of avoid, people do compare, well, I used to be able to do this and I want to be able to do this again. We're encouraging them to move forward, as we do in coaching, but look forward and create a new normal, which is something to aim for. And you're really avoiding that looking to the past, because everything has changed for them. Everything changes. And it's navigating, going making peace with that and then moving forward.
Yeah, I think that's such a great point, that actually the phrase back to work is unhelpful, because whatever you are doing, you're not going back anywhere. You're going forward to a new life, and your relationship with work will have changed, and your relationship with everything will have changed. And that is the point, is keeping that forward focus on what is life for me now, and reassessing, which is something that coaching in general does beautifully. But this is a point where people really have an opportunity to reassess what they really want. That actually a lot of people don't have that opportunity. And I hate to make it sound like it's a gift and all that kind of thing, because often it's a very painful kind of a gift, isn't it? But people do really readjust their expectations about themselves, about life, about work, and that can be a real shift for them. And we see that profoundly happening all the time. And I think the other point I wanted to bring up around unexpected impacts on people and organizations is, you might have two people who sit next to each other at the same row of desks. One of them is diagnosed with cancer, and they both get diagnosed with cancer, same time or different times, and they want to treat that completely differently. So one person might want everyone in the team to know. One person might want no one to know. One person might want to be outgoing and volunteering or remaining through work through all of their treatment. One person might want to take a complete step back. And those are, completely normal reactions on both of their parts. So I think that's the other thing, is just because it seems like it's the same kind of journey, everyone's journey is so unique. And for an organization, that can be really challenging to cope with, because what they want is a kind of structured policy that works for everyone. And the reality is actually that not only is that experience different, but actually their legal responsibilities are that, they have to maintain confidentiality if somebody wants to not tell everyone, for example. And so each of those persons has rights and responsibilities that are different, that are unique to them. And so preparing an employer for how to deal with that, and their team for how to deal with that, I think is a real challenge. And the other piece for me is, though we work directly with the coachee and with their manager typically, the impact on the team has a ripple effect on everybody who's around them. And that, I think, is something that organizations often miss, is that this isn't just a kind of normal, someone's been out for a few weeks and they're coming back. This is a real psychological impact on everyone who's involved with that person's work. So I think that's something that we often see. And Anna, I know we sometimes do other kinds of programs, not just coaching, that help organizations be more resilient. Do you want to talk a little bit about those?
Yeah, so I mean, we offer training, policy work, and consultancy. And again, often we will work with teams in departments for exactly the reason you've said. If it's sadly a bereavement, a colleagues died from cancer, that can have a profound impact on the immediate team and beyond that. And people need to be able to talk about that. And it, again, going back to that, normalizing the conversation about cancer, need to be able to have those conversations and process what they've been through. And we provide individual coaching for people in that sense, but we also provide the training to help people know how to support a colleague, and again feel more confident about talking about cancer. So many people avoid. We hear about lots of people who, someone walked to the other side of the room to avoid them because they clearly didn't want to talk about cancer. And everyone has their own experience with cancer as well. And there may be triggers that people, don't want to talk about it. It's even but the more I talk about cancer, when we have these kind of conversations, the complexities of it never fail to amaze me. And it's taken for granted. And so that's why we offer training to colleagues, training to line managers, to HR departments, to help them feel better equipped and more confident to deliver and offer the support that people need.
That's great. And Joe, are there other things that you think about with relation to kind of organizational level resilience that come out of the coaching work that we do?
Yeah, I think technically for leaders of organizations, it's the importance of building a space in the culture within the organization that accepts that people can have diagnoses that affect not just them but the organization, and that it's not about just delivering the strategy. It's about how you take care of your people, and how others then perceive the way that you respond affects and how the whole organisation then moves forward or doesn't move forward. Because if you pay lip service to, we're a supportive organisation, then live that. When a senior person, often it just seems, it can, my experience is that sometimes when a senior person is diagnosed with cancer, the support or lack of support seems to be much more noticeable than it is if it's a more junior person, because sometimes the pressure and the needs of the business are such that the focus is on how we're going to cover their absence, how we're going to cover the fact that they don't seem to have the same drive and energy. They're not doing 14 hours a day. They can only do 10. And certainly that was my experience at a board level. But the pressure was, we just need you to get back to doing it how you used to do it.
And I think it really, to me, it often raises broader resilience challenges that were already present within the organization, but that were going unaddressed. So that very kind of situation where you're depending on some very high performers to really overwork, that was never going to be sustainable in the long run. But here's this organization thinking that it was. And so they actually have to address that. And it's not just about, yes, of course, it's about showing support for people. And I think your point around whether you do or don't show support for people at the highest levels in the organization, that really says something to the rest of the organization about how they will or won't be supported when they're going through a challenge. And for me, the other piece is, often people, we talked a little bit about reasonable adjustments, but often a big conversation that comes up repeatedly for me is like, what am I allowed to ask for? And there's this sense of like, oh, am I taking the mick? Am I overstepping my boundaries? Am I being, cheeky by asking for too many things? When the reality is, the whole point of reasonable adjustments is to allow people who have incredible value to be able to work at their best. And employers in the UK have a legal responsibility to recognize that. But the reason for that is because they have a lot to add to the workplace, And so if we give people the right support, then they can be an incredible value for that organization. And if you treat people right, they will be incredibly loyal to you. And I think that's the other piece, is identifying the new strengths that someone has, because someone who's been through an experience like this has incredible resilience and has other incredible skills that they have developed through the process of going through cancer treatment or through a bereavement or through something like that, that they can apply. They have various kinds of mindset skills and coping skills that they've developed that are hugely valuable for organizations. And I think that's the challenge, is to get the organization to recognize the change and to open up new pathways for how that might be used by the organization as well. Jo, did you want to come in?
Could I just come in on that?
Yes, please.
In terms of organisational resilience, it's not on the reasonable adjustment that you can ask for, but one of the key things that an organisation needs to do is it's about allowing time for someone to recover and adjust on their return to work. And again, with more senior people, the pressure is that, the strategy needs to be delivered, and we don't have the time, we don't have the luxury. But actually, as you said, if you can step back and allow them time, then in fact you will get to wherever you need to get to.
Yeah, hugely.
And just on that, on that note, one thing that we do often see is if a very senior person in an organisation is diagnosed with cancer, the culture of the organisation becomes more supportive. Often, it's not where it should be, but it does happen. That's when things will change. There are positives to it. So, you see that the senior director has got cancer and they talk about it. It goes back to normalizing conversations about cancer. But definitely that's what we see when we're working with organizations. If someone in a very senior position has had cancer, their approach to it and the organization's approach to it can be very different in a positive way. But that's often the case.
Yeah, and that can really open up other kinds of supportive conversations overall as well. I've got one more question for the panel, and then I would love to open it out to questions from the audience. So if anyone has questions, please do, or just thoughts, things that are resonating for you, please do feel free to put those in the chat and we'll pick them up, or you can raise your hand and we'll call on you, and we'd be happy to do that as well. So I think that the thing I want to close this section of our time together with is, what do you both think in terms of the future trends for coaching to support people impacted by cancer in the workplace are, and how coaches should prepare for these trends? Anna, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, I mean, sadly, there's only going to be more people who are diagnosed with cancer and impacted by cancer. And I'm conscious that we haven't talked about carers and the coaching that we offer for carers and the support that carers need in the workplace. So I think in terms of future trend, you're going to have more carers who are working. You're going to have more people diagnosed with cancer and wanting to work. And people bereaved to cancer needing some time and support to work through that. So it's really about being prepared and organizations being prepared rather than their support being a reaction to someone speaking up, which is what we often hear. It takes for one person to speak up and then, more people are able to. But it's about being prepared, having the policies in place, training line managers, normalizing conversations about cancer so that the support is there already when the person needs it. And they don't, which is what we often see, sadly, they don't have to fight for their support. They don't have to fight to get a phased return or to get pushed back to get these adjustments. It's easy for them.
Yeah. Joe, do you want to come in on that as well?
It's very briefly, thank you. And again, building on Anna's point, organisations, looking forward, organisations being better prepared, both in terms of looking at the whole age spectrum of who within their workforce experiences cancer, because it's affecting a younger age group in the working population, as well as an older working population profile, and building policies that actually then respond to that. So for the younger age working group, building the sort of support that means that people don't feel that their career has somehow been written off because they've experienced cancer and they somehow are seen as less reliable, because some of that applies at the older workforce age group. But equally, just because they're older, it doesn't mean that they want to leave work because they've experienced cancer. So it's really being sensitive to that and engaging in conversations that really open up the heart of that this is a culture we have, and this is a culture that we want more of. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, those are great points. And I think one thing I would also build on is it's not just about people who have had a cancer experience, receive treatment, and then return to work. It's also about people who are experiencing stage 4 cancer, terminal cancer, but living longer. And they deserve every right to work as much as anyone else who wants to. And there's some wonderful work by the World Health Organization on this, describing the rights that people who are experiencing a terminal illness should have with respect to working. And the assumption that they don't want to work, I think, is really wrong. And Chris Hoy's work on this as well has been really great. So Chris Hoy's work on people who are experiencing stage 4 cancer and wanting to remain active and remain part of life and not being written off, I think is huge. And the other thing I'm aware we haven't really talked about is people who are self-employed, because plenty of people who are self-employed receive a cancer diagnosis, and the support for them is also really challenging. And we do some work around that as well. So I just want to point out that this isn't just an issue of people who are in large organizations. It's also people who run small businesses or have their own business, and they're often struggling, and the challenges that they face are, equally pressing, I would say. Anyone else want to build on that? I can see we've got a couple comments in the chat, so I might read those out. But anyone have anything to add before I do that? Good to go. Fabulous. So we have a question from Dan. So he's saying the loyalty is a key part, not just to an organization, but to the individuals that supported you. If not a formal program, then the individuals that supported Dan in particular were the people that he felt loyal to. And so he's asking, is that something that we see happening with some of the people that we work with? Is it around the bonds that you form during that time are less around the kind of overall organizational structure, more around the relationships that you forge? And I can see Jo nodding, so I'm going to call on her right away.
Yeah, so thanks, Caitlin. Yes, definitely. And again, it's a frequent theme about the importance of my team. And then when I went back, the way that they embraced me and supported me through as well. So yeah, I think that loyalty really does make a difference to how comfortable someone feels in making the transition back to work.
Yeah. Anna?
Yeah, and just to add to that, this highlights the significance of the line manager and the important role they have, because you're right, when a line manager gets it right, when they support someone, that's very integral to the person's return to work. Without their line manager support, it makes it so much harder. So when someone has a good line manager who's receptive, who's got time for them, who tries to understand and help them, I hear it a lot. My line manager is just amazing, and you just think, great, I know you've got that support. Even better if I'm then working with their line manager and they ask and they just want help me do the right thing, help me understand what to do. So that loyalty, hearing that's huge. But I would also say there is the sense that the organization supported me through my darkest time. I think the longer term, it's that recognition and that the value of the organization as a whole that supported that person. They will be so loyal. But in the short term, it's very much that line manager. So it's both, definitely both, but immediately that line manager has a huge impact on that person's recovery.
Oh yeah, enormously so. And actually, we have a workshop coming up for line managers. So Amanda, if you could post the info about that in the chat. So we run webinars for people publicly. So the next one's on the 23rd of June. So please do come along to that if that's something that resonates with you. If you're managing people with cancer, we'd love to have you there to learn a bit more about the best practice for that support. And I don't want to be negative, but I know we've all heard absolute horror stories about managers that aren't supportive as well, and how horribly that impacts someone's return to work also. So we love to work with line managers who really want to be receptive and support their teams. And I think in particular, one of the things that they can do is around flexibility and scheduling, and being really open to thinking about how they can adjust the work to be more flexible, because that's mostly what people need is the ability to kind of choose when and where they're able to work as they're returning to work, and thinking about the kind of capacity that they have for particular kinds of tasks. Those are the big things, really. Jo, did you want to add anything else there?
Thanks. So one thing that we haven't touched on is the financial challenges for the individual, both when they're diagnosed and during treatment, and having policies that enable them to continue to be paid and to have certainty about what they're going to be paid and for how long, because sometimes there is no clarity around that. And even within one organization, the process and the decision making can be very different. And again, for a lot of our coaches, concern about their financial security. Am I going to be able to go to work? Am I going to be able to continue to pay my rent, pay for my property? All of those concerns are key to helping someone to make their way through the experience of working and living with cancer.
Yeah, that's a really big one. Definitely a theme we see a lot of. So again, please feel free to put questions. Here we go. Oh, Maria, can you say more about how you work with people when the manager is not supportive? Anna, do you want to start? And then Jo and I can have a little think.
Yeah, so it does happen. It does come up. And our role as coaches it's very different to the work we do with the coachee. We are coaches there. We are coaching the person. When we're working with a line manager, we are advising and we're guiding. And that's all we can do. We understand the legislation, we understand the disability discrimination, the equal rights, and we educate the line manager. We can't tell them what to do, we can advise. And so if a line manager isn't being supportive, we do our best to help them understand. Often if they're not being supportive, it comes from a place of not understanding fully. So it often is just about educating and explaining why, and the sense that this isn't forever. There's often, and again, with a line manager who's not supportive, there's a miscommunication. The employee feels they can't talk to their line manager, therefore the line manager isn't getting the full picture. They might not fully understand their side effects because the person doesn't feel comfortable telling them. And so our role, it's not to talk on behalf of the coachee, definitely not. We enable the coachee to advocate for themselves. But if that's becoming really difficult, then we can give generic examples of, well, this is what a person might be going through. This is why, and just educate them. I think, there's very few managers who don't want to do the right thing. They just often don't know and don't understand, and they need more information. And that's where we can help.
And just to add to that, sometimes managers say, I just don't know how to talk to them. I don't know what to ask them. And again, in terms of guidance, our approach is that, well, if you don't know, you can ask the coachee, how can I help you? What is it that you need? As opposed to feeling that because you don't know as a line manager, you can't have that discussion. Because you're both learning together and you're going to go forward together. And we're dealing with people and human beings here. And sometimes the line managers, they have fears about the word cancer. And so are very, very hesitant and reluctant about opening up any conversation because they just don't feel that they don't feel they can deal with it.
Yeah. So there's like the personal layer, and then there's the organizational layer. And sometimes that manager might be getting pressure from above for that team to perform, and that's what's reflected in the kind of conversation that they're having, and that's why some of these challenges are coming out. And usually in those situations, I might try to advise the line manager to think about the kind of long-term impacts of the kind of conversation they're having. So, you have to think about the organization's our interest is the coachee, but you also have to think about if we do something to this coachee that is not within the bounds of the way that you might treat a person with a disability, because that is what cancer is once you've been diagnosed with it, you could be opening up a world of difficulty for the organization. So actually, sometimes there's education to be had around what's the impact of this going to be if you're not able to resolve it between yourselves in your team. How is that going to open up a broader organizational conversation? And is that something you want, or is it something that you can manage amongst yourselves, at a team level? So I think that is sometimes when we have a more kind of recalcitrant manager, is just reminding them about the context that they're operating in, and that it's different from other kinds of shorter term sicknesses or ways that you might manage other things. So I think that's a real key. We've had another question from Dan around career pivots in organizations after cancer, and are organizations supportive of this? Any thoughts there?
What do you mean by career pivots?
I think what he might mean is like if you're changing roles or perhaps changing your kind of job function, or wanting to say, I want to go be a baker, some changing your career in some way. So not coming back to the same role, but then moving on to something else.
Yeah. One of the things that we always, I think, all consistently as coaches will say to someone when they're returning to work is, now is not the time to make any big decisions. Now is not the time to really be deciding to have a big career change. Not to say that you can't, but just when you're returning to work, there, I hear it a lot of times. People say, I can't do this. I'm going to have to leave, or I have to do something different. and often that's a response to them not getting supported at work, or their return not going particularly well. When the return goes well, um, you know, you phase back into your role. When you feel a bit more settled, that's the time to start perhaps thinking about these kind of decisions about changing your career, changing your job. At the earlier point of returning to work, there's enough disruption going on, to be perfectly honest, and you're trying to get some kind of new normality. So, I mean, I guess that answers your question. From a personal perspective, we would say maybe park this for now. Let's think about it a bit further down the line. But your question was about organizations, wasn't it? Should do all what?
Yeah.
Sorry, you're going to have to repeat the question again.
So questions about career pivot in the organization after cancer. Do you find that organizations support this?
So
I think it's difficult to generalize.
Yeah.
I think it's difficult to generalize.
Yeah. So
yeah.
it's not as black and white as that, is
No,
it? Like I say, there's what the person wants, what's right for them. I mean, there's no reason why an organization wouldn't, and they certainly shouldn't, not support someone with changing roles or progressing in their career just because they had cancer. So it's a bit more grey.
Yeah. And could I just add as well that, again, from a coaching perspective, when someone's returning to work and having to deal with all the things that Anna has alluded to, it's also it's not it's again it's something about timing and readiness to make that sort of decision about changing your career or changing your role. Because if you're not at your most confident, putting yourself under pressure to move into a new area and a new field when you've already got so much to deal with in terms of adjusting and coming to terms with the cancer experience, it's again, I think our guidance would be no, just wait and give it time, plan it. We're here to support you. Use us to help you work through how you're going to do it and what the timetable might look like. But please avoid coming back and saying, right, tomorrow I've had enough. I'm not going to do it.
I think the only thing I would add is I think it is fairly common for people to want to change their relationship with work in some way. In fact, I don't think I've met a coachee that doesn't want to change their relationship with work in some way. And it is about the timing of that and how you give people the right assistance at the right time. So sometimes people will come in maybe a bit further along from their treatment and they've had that opportunity to kind of grapple with the immediacy of the physical side effects and the mental side effects, and now they're at that other stage of like reassessing their priorities in life. And so I think in that situation, but that's a very different kind of conversation, so and at that level, whether the organization is supportive or not, the role is really to support the individual in deciding what's right for them, and it may or may not be with the organization. And I think that's the important thing is if you have someone in your organization who doesn't really align anymore with that organization's goals, then it's best for both sides if that person makes the change that's right for them, whether that's within the organization or outside of it. The key is to find the kind of North Star that person is aiming towards and making that right change for them at that time. And of course anyone can do this at any time, but it's rare that people do this when they're kind of set in a career that they've chosen, that people have that opportunity to reassess, really, I want to make a big change like that, and so I think Joe and Anna are completely right. It's about finding the right timing for when you are fully resourced to really cope with what you're asking of yourself in terms of change and the new challenges that will bring. Dan, did you want to come on mic for a second? I can see you've raised your hand.
Yeah. The question, it was more around the line of, at least in my circumstance, right? It was coming back from maybe where I was, running a division, which was, high intensity, to going to maybe being more of an individual contributor, right? But there wasn't a program within the company. I kind of navigated my way through and found that by itself. But I could imagine with a lot of other cancer patients, as you said, you change as an individual. you change the importance of what you're looking for and where your time is and so forth. So you're looking to maybe make that a little bit of that shift, not necessarily when I speak of career, not necessarily going from, being a baker to doing something else, right? But more necessarily within the organization itself, maybe, taking on a little different role or a little lesser of a role or a little less intense of a role. That's what I meant. So sorry.
Thank you
Yeah,
for
no, I
go
yeah,
ahead.
no, I get, yeah, I get what you're saying. And yes, what we also often encourage people to do. So hopefully, Dan, you would have had a phased return to your role, where you would have started on reduced hours and gradually worked your way up. And often within that, that gives a person an opportunity to try, well, maybe I could do this role on a part-time basis. Or maybe there's some duties that I could pick up or have picked up as part of my phased return that I want to do going forward. And then we would encourage someone not to make any contractual changes until they're really certain, like whether it's a flexible working request, or if it's maybe applying for a different role in the organization, once they've phased back into work. So yeah, often the phased return can sometimes be a bit of try before you buy as well. See what works out for you, see what feels like a good fit. And again, making that decision at the right time.
I think that's a wonderful note for us to finish on. So it only remains for me to say thank you so much to Joe and Anna and everyone who's joined us today. It's been a real pleasure hosting you and for your insightful questions and thoughts. That's been really wonderful. And Amanda has posted in the chat various ways to follow us. So maybe we could also have the Working with Cancer website back up for that. And you're most welcome to email us if you have any questions as a follow-up to this. And please do join our webinar that's coming up in June for managers. We'd love to see you there. So thank you, everyone. Again, we've really loved having you today. We really appreciate it. And you're welcome. I'm going to put my email address in the chat, so you're welcome to follow up with me. Anna and Joe, if you want to do that as well, that would be great. Right. There's me. And then perhaps Anna and Joe can add theirs as well. It would be lovely to hear from you if you need anything from us. And we're going to close the session now. So thank you so much. And hopefully we'll see you at some other ICW events sometime soon. Thanks all. Bye for now.
Bye.